we have to start by kind of defining what we're talking about, which is what we do when life knocks us down. It's the getting up and getting on with it bit. And you just had a fantastic talk from Allan about getting up and getting on with it. But that moment where you realise you're in trouble, and actually I want to start with you, because that was that terrible day when you thought, actually, I might kill myself. Did you know before then, or was that absolute point where you thought, now something really has to be done?
Yeah, I had suicidal thoughts for a long time, but what had happened was I started having nightmares about hurting my wife and my daughter, and I thought I cannot risk them being in any danger, and that's when I became completely determined to take my own life that day, and that was the day that I was going to end it.
Ruby, what about you? Because you've dealt with depression for years and years and years. What was the moment, was there a moment when you thought, actually now I really have to do something about this?
Did you see my show?
I did.
Right. I said it in there.
I know, but you can't. There will be some people who unfortunately had a big lunch and didn't get back in time.
Oh, okay. Did I have a moment? I don't think there's anything dramatic. Yeah, I guess about 7 years ago I said, that's enough now. So,
was there a thing though that made you say?
Well, no, with an illness, there's no thing.
No thing.
It just, yeah, it's in your genes, and then if you have crazy parents, you won the lottery. So, it's not situation appropriate. When I was working in TV for 25 years, then suddenly it was done. You know, they kind of dump you and replace you with a firmer version of you.
Not as funny.
Not as funny, no. But you kind of know it's over. And I keep going on when I'm feeling okay. We're supposed to be dead by 30. So you have to reinvent yourself, because we just go on and on and on. So inadvertently, it was like a death. But we have many deaths, you know, when things are over. Boy, did that teach me a lesson, because you get addicted to being famous. It's an addiction, you know, and suddenly you're on the tube, and you say, no, I don't have a ticket. Do you recognize me? And he'd go, fuck you, you know, you buy a ticket like everybody else. So gradually you wean off, and then I went to school to become a psychotherapist. By then I completely forgot about the last life. Completely, and I was now a student with my books, and then I thought, I'm not going to be a psychotherapist. Then I got really interested in the brain. So it takes care of itself as long as you don't harp on the past, because then you're a bore, saying, do you remember me? Here's some of my tapes. You know, you can't get another peak once you have a peak, and let it go.
All right. Russ, what about you? Because you've been through some stuff. You had that diagnosis with your boy?
Yeah, high levels of anxiety from as young as I can remember, and then deep-seated insecurity and inadequacy all the way through medical school, and I was kind of thinking, when I graduate as a doctor, that'll get rid of all of my insecurities and doubts, and of course, graduated as a doctor at 22 when I graduated, started at 17, so it was kind of young, you know, and still felt completely inadequate and incompetent, and, you know, was working as a GP from about age 25 and just started to feel more and more depressed and anxious and thinking, what's wrong with me? And that was kind of what started to send me on my path of exploration. So you're referring to something that happened much later, years later. What are we talking, 5 years ago, when my son was diagnosed with autism. Actually 7 years ago now, and man, that was like, I didn't know it was possible to feel so much pain. I never experienced such pain in my life, and I guess I was kind of lucky that by that point I had the kind of tools to help me deal with that pain, but the kind of the inadequacy and all that kind of stuff goes way back to childhood and crazy parents and bad genes and all that kind of stuff.
You know, Tim, I'm going to ask you now, and I feel odd
about
because
my crazy parents?
because
You've never
you're the only chief happiness officer I've met, and I'm kind of thinking that it must be just golden. It's golden, isn't it? Your whole life.
My wife's in the audience, so
So it is. It's fantastic.
No, No, it's not. And that's actually, it's one of the greatest myths. I mean, obviously, Russ talks about a happiness trap, and I equally talk a lot about some of the myths and misconceptions of happiness, and some of what comes from being known as Dr. Happy, for example. I'm not happy all the time. No one is. That would be another form of psychopathology, really.
It'd be exhausting.
But I think what we've actually heard here, I think, and what I hear day after day, time and time again, from people like the ones that are on stage and the people that come to my office who ostensibly are massively successful, who have achieved medical degrees and fame and the top police officer, and yet the majority of those people suffer from what I and other people have come to call impostor syndrome. That we all experience this inadequacy, this feeling that one day I'm going to get caught out, and those voices that eat away at us like that can be very destructive, incredibly destructive, and yes, even I have those voices too sometimes. So
What do yours say?
We don't have enough time for that, really.
So when you get to the low point, how do you find out what to do next without somebody like Russ or Tim? I'm looking at you, Ruby Wax.
We find out what to do next.
I thought cognitive therapy.
But actually, the first thing that helped you was drugs, wasn't it?
I think the first thing was a diagnosis. I thought I'd gone completely and totally mad, stark staring mad. And the psychiatrist said, "No, Al, you haven't gone mad. You have post-traumatic stress disorder." And I said, "What's that?" I mean, today we know all about it. And he said, "You also got chronic depression," which I had heard a bit about. But once the diagnosis was made, I was like, okay, well, that's something I might be able to work on. Even though he said, look, I don't know whether you'll ever get over it, but at least then I knew something I could identify and attack, as opposed to just being diagnosed as being mad.
Yeah, when I was growing up, nobody knew what depression was. So I kept having, because it's physical, it's a physical sensation where you can't get up. So I had every blood test. And then the day a doctor said, "You have clinical depression," it was one of the happiest days. Because then I thought, I know what this is. So then he started, then I got drugs. And then you could concentrate on drugs. Now, and they're not the only, if the drugs work, we wouldn't have relapse. Otherwise, I wouldn't be studying anything else. But I think that was liberating.
Yes.
Then I found out I was crazy.
What about exercise?
I was going to say, it can't be just the head, because the head is part of the body. And when you have to be awareness, is everything. You're not. Where are you aware? You have to be aware that where are your feet on the ground?
I did the thing.
It's an embodiment thing. Yeah. So, but you could be doing yoga and you're also on the telephone and you're also shouting at your kids. So again, that has to be kind of trained. I guess Tai Chi does it naturally, but athletes do it, where you really start to bring your focus down, 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 because if they were thinking about where their car keys are, they'd smash into a tree. So that's the right kind of training. So I kind of do things like that.
But there are benefits, Russ, aren't there, from physical exercise
Not if your brain's
without
not
adding
there.
the mindfulness as well?
Well, it just means paying attention. It's no big spooky thing. You're not suddenly going to go on Oprah.
No, but I mean, if you go for a walk, you can actually be thinking about other things and you can still get some benefit out of that, yeah?
Yeah, Richard, I think that for me personally, it's a combination of both. You need great physical health to have great mental health. I don't see you ever having one or the other.
Yeah.
And I think the benefits of physical exercise are undervalued. And one of my recovery programs was actually going to the gym, and I would train for 8 hours a day just to get my physical health back. And I still train 5 mornings a week and 2 nights a week. And it's something that I take great love in, but I exercise in a really positive environment with really positive people. I train 3 mornings a week at the Indigenous Centre at Redfern with all the Indig guys who are the most supportive brilliant people I've ever been exposed to in my life. So it's a mental health training as well. What Ruby refers to is I'm training with positive people who are supportive and caring. And if you can get that balance, then hallelujah, yeah, it's great.
But those guys that work out, who can't get their thighs together, they
Not
are
me.
some of the most disconnected people you will ever meet in your life.
Don't doubt it.
They, can't even get their legs together. Completely.
If you can't get your legs together, you can't get your life together.
No. That's a good T-shirt. That's a good T-shirt. Yeah, that's good. I think we got a brand here.
Russ, I want to ask you, because we were just talking about exercise. I think we were talking about exercise. And the thing about exercise is the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it's got to be the same with mindfulness, with trying to address the problems that you see in your life with different approaches and attitudes. It's something you have to learn to do. It's something you have to practice to get better at.
Yeah, so the acceptance and commitment therapy approach is a bit different to many other mindfulness-based approaches in that it doesn't overemphasize meditation. It's like if we want people exercising more, we wouldn't say you've got to do 40 minutes at the gym every day. We'd say park your car a bit further from the supermarket, go for a 5-minute walk at lunchtime. All these little bits make a difference. And it's the same with mindfulness. There's lots of ways. I mean, great if you're willing to kind of do your 40 minutes of yoga or meditation, but lots of people won't do that. I mean, it's the same with going, like lots of people with a gym membership. Wouldn't gyms be in trouble if everyone with a gym membership turned up? They'd be like, whoa, no, So let's look for, as Ruby said, it's kind of like practice. You want to practice this stuff. But let's look for lots of little moments throughout the day where we can practice it. I can be mindful with you right now in this conversation. Or I can be thinking about the funny anecdote that I'm going to tell in 5 minutes' time. It's going to make a difference. There's lots of different kind of... Like, I checked out a moment ago when you were talking, I was thinking, I'd better think of something profound to say.
When she's talking, you must concentrate, because you don't know what's going to happen.
But also agree with you, like that people can really exercise. Think sometimes people with a diagnosis of anorexia nervosa are exercising for hours every day to keep their body in this state of wasted thinness. They're not doing it mindfully. They're kind of fused with I'm fat, I'm ugly, I have to do something to get attractive. So there are benefits to exercise, but when you do it mindfully, it's very different than when you do it fused with this is what I've got to do because there's something wrong with me if I don't do it.
Tim, what about these, the approaches that you take? So if you've got a new patient, how do you get them started? How do you get them going with a kind of different way of thinking, a practice, if you like?
Well, that wouldn't necessarily be my first goal. I mean, it depends on the person. And I suppose, just picking up actually on the last few minutes' conversation, one of the biggest lessons I've learned as a therapist and coach over recent years, which is quite different to when I started out. I started out as a clinical psychologist before positive psychology, so I specialised in misery before I'd even heard of happiness. And I was trained in hardcore cognitive behaviour therapy, very, very hardcore. Nothing else was given any consideration. At the particular school I was at, everything else was considered second grade or third grade or worse, really. Cognitive therapy has obviously evolved a lot since then. This is quite a few years ago now, and obviously the addition of mindfulness and acceptance and other things have come under the family of therapies in a sense. And then even more recently, I've particularly focused on positive psychology. But what I've learned above and beyond any of the academic or the research, empirical evidence that I've learned, particularly being involved in an organisation that I've been on the board of for the last few years, which is helping young people talk more about, starting conversations about and breaking the stigma associated with mental health, is that different things work for different people. And I've become much less hardline. And also, not just that different things work for different people, but different combinations of things. I mean, personally, exercise is the best antidepressant and stress buster for me. I do go to the gym regularly, just as much for my mind as I do for my body. But I know that, and for a lot of other people, I'm sure in the audience, a lot of people, exercise is very beneficial, but so too is mindfulness and acceptance, so too is cognitive therapy and other forms of therapy. And so to come back to your question, my goal wouldn't just be to change someone's thinking, it's really to work out what do they want to achieve, or what do they need to achieve, and what's the best way for them to get there, not the best way for me to get there. And that's, I suppose, the skill in a good therapist is working out what will work for that particular person in that context, given where they are, given what they want to achieve.
So actually, Allan was telling us before about the exercise he does. Do you have a regimen, either physical exercise or mental exercise that you do every day or every week?
No, because I can't get but I rather than pumping iron, because I get so aggressive, I could eat people. I mean, because that muscle, it means for me, there's no air going through. You know, it's just bulk.
Do they have your photo at the door of gyms? This woman must not be admitted.
No, don't let her, because she'll eat your ankle off. But I do Pilates, because you just concentrate on the bit you're concentrating on. Usually it's your pelvic floor, which is very important, especially if you're cleaning the house.
Is that the one?
You get
Is that the muscle
fluff up.
when you?
You don't even need a Hoover. So it's important. It's an important thing.
Is that the muscle when you're having a pee and you think, I'm going to stop peeing right now, and that's your pelvic floor?
Yeah. It's also if you were in Bangkok and you shot. Are we not supposed to be talking about this?
None of this is on this bit of paper.
No. I had different questions at the beginning of this. I interviewed Mick Malthouse this morning, and he was a pussycat compared to trying to wrangle.
I don't know who we interviewed.
How much is it?
How much is what?
I'm not going to ask you this. I'm going to ask Russ. How much is it about getting to a point where you're making a decision and then putting those ideas into practice so that they become habits?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because, you know, all of us can now think of things that logically and rationally we could do to improve our lives, and we're not doing it. You know, I'm sure there's no one here who's kind of doing all the things we know are good for us. So it's one thing to know it, another thing to do it. You know, it's like building any habit. I've just gone blank. You find ways to fit it into your life. For me, you know, it's quite hard for me because I travel around a lot. It probably is for you too, you know. But as much as possible, if you can build structure in your life and fit things in at certain times. I know, for example, when when I'm in Melbourne, I can go and see my gym at certain fixed times and so forth, and that's great. I have a personal trainer called Victor, and he works me hard, and I see him, you know, kind of 3 times a week. But when I'm traveling interstate, I can't do that. So I have little rituals like, after a workshop, I'll go for a walk for an hour before I go back to my hotel, because if I go back to my hotel, I'll just fall asleep, you know. So it's just finding ways as much as you can, and I guess the more regular your life is, the easier it's to find regular daily routines to fit in. Can you do 5 minutes of walking at lunchtime, or can you do your gratitude diary in the evening before bed, or can you do your exercise regime at X, Y, and Z? You know, just I feel like I'm rambling.
No. Allan, you'd clearly rather be sailing. I think that's clear from looking at your book and what you were talking about. But what do you do when you're not sailing?
I love sailing, and being at sea with my family was a great appreciation of the basics of life, and it showed me that we don't actually need much in life to be happy. But I think that what we spoke about before, the Dalai Lama was talking about, and other speakers, was this essence of giving and sharing and caring. And the volunteer work I do now, it gives me an opportunity to give people hope who have the same mental illnesses that I suffered from, that they can get better. And so I have this sense of worth now that I've never had before in my life. And I think for me personally that I say the sense of worth is like a life support system, and its importance can never be overstated or underestimated, and that we as a society need to just do things that give us a wonderful sense of worth. It doesn't matter financially benefits or whatever, it's enriching our lives of doing things for others that just empowers you and gives you this sense of, well, I have something positive to give. And when I lost my sense of worth, I know how much it meant to me. And to get it back, I know doubly how much it means to me now.
It comes up again and again, doesn't it? That being part of something that's not, when there's not obviously something in it for you. When you're doing things for other people, that paradox makes you feel better.
There's no doubt about it. For a recent book that came out last year, I interviewed a lot of people who, on a variety of criteria, were judged to be positive agers, people who'd successfully aged. And there were a whole range of factors that we know from the research and that we know probably just from looking around us that go towards longevity. Physical health is one of them, obviously mental health is one. But without a doubt, after reading, for months and months of reading the research and studying the research and then talking to and interviewing people, the number one factor was connectedness, a sense of connectedness, feeling like they belong. The flip side of that is loneliness and isolation is potentially going to be one of the biggest killers with an ageing population, something that I think we all should be concerned about for ourselves, for our parents, and for everyone, for our communities and society. So there's no doubt, and really at any age, we know very, very famously one of the founding fathers of positive psychology, Chris Peterson, summed up the principles of thriving and flourishing by saying other people matter. And those three words have really been like a banner for positive psychology, and partly to counteract the myth that it's about hedonism, which it's not. Real thriving and flourishing is much more than me, but certainly other people, positive relationships, being connected to something beyond ourselves is undoubtedly, I'd go so far to say probably the most important thing any of us can do for our health and well-being.
Do you do any of that, Ruby?
Well, if you devote, and you have to do, a habit is repetition, but I don't have a specific time. I think you can, like at a bus stop or whatever, or even during road rage.
During road rage.
Yeah, you could, if their awareness, or if you're doing like those 80 sit-ups, it's just deciding when you want to switch on that attention because you're growing this part of your brain. Now, I'm not a fanatic about this stuff, but if I can get it so that I can get my cortisol down, we work like neural Wi-Fi. It means that the next person but isn't working with aggression, and the next and the next. And so all this stuff about working on yourself is not about just ending there. It's about cooling your children, and then it goes to the community. To me, that's completely political. Rather than saying it's your fault, I feel this way. Get ready. It starts in here.
I really believe that.
Self-improvement should ripple out.
I think it does, because there's nothing as stressful as somebody you love being stressed about something. That's immediately brings up the hormone that makes us feel awful.
Somebody's got to keep it down. Otherwise, we start to lock antlers. If you get riled, the other guy gets riled, and then businesses would do so much better if they, when they're locked like that, they would hold up a white flag and say the next 10 minutes are a waste of time and energy. This is how they train kids now, to understand how riled up they are. If they're too high up, they can't take a test.
Okay.
Because their memory goes.
Allan, where are you now? Because you've been on this huge journey, and parts of it were bloody awful. How do you feel about it all as you look back?
I look back at it in a really positive way. It allows me then to have this amazing experience that I can utilise for good reason and good purpose. And the police force has now embraced my experience, and I give a lot back to the cops about how to not end up where I ended up. So I'm really excited about that. I have a lot of involvement with the police now, with Beyond Blue and Soldier On, and I'm one of the 8 Australians in the National Leadership Group for Suicide Prevention Australia. So I'm in a wonderful opportunity to use that experience to help others. But what I've learned is that we as a society have lost the ability to care for each other. And we need to have the courage to care for others and never give that up.
That's a good point, and a good place. I think that's a really good place to wrap up this panel. Please thank the panel, Allan Sparks.
Thank you.
Russ Harris, Ruby Wax, and Tim Sharp.
If you go to this supermarket and shouting, I want to buy peace of mind, then people laughing, or people feel that person's mind is something wrong.
Now, this word connections is a really interesting one, because our kids today are more connected than ever.
Of course, then when you're in an institution, people call you up they tell you to perk up. Yeah, perk up, because I didn't think of that.
I should have a happiness project, I decided. As soon as I have some free time, I'm going to do that.